Recording in progress.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, so next on the agenda is the city administrator's report. Bola, is that you?
Thank you, Alderman Gould. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Michelle Boyer, the city's new communications manager. She resumed this position on November 6th. We are happy to have Michelle join the city family and look to her many contributions in the days.
Welcome. Thank you
Yeah, absolutely.
for joining the city, and I think your presence with as it relates to communications and branding is going to be very valuable for us. So glad to have you on board. Next is the department report. So let's move to first item is discussion of strategy for social media posts. Is that Michelle? Are you
Yes,
taking that?
it is Michelle.
So I kind of wrote up a background here in the agenda, as you can see, but I plan to take kind of a two-pronged approach to managing our social media outlets. The first is really those necessary posts, that is meeting updates, city hall updates, announcements that really pertain to the city and need to be disseminated immediately. And those I generally prepare ahead of time and schedule those to go out. We utilize a outlet called Sprout Social, which allows us to schedule posts ahead of time, which I find very helpful because then it allows you to kind of get those posts that occur on a regular basis out, ready to go, and it gives you more time to focus on the what I'm calling the second prong of my social media plan, which is kind of more human interest stories. This is going to take some time for me to really build up a backlog of these types of posts, but what I'm envisioning is really exposing the human side of the city to our residents. I want people to be able to put faces to the names of the city employees, the representatives that they hear their names or see at events but maybe don't know as much about. And so that to me looks like profiles of employees, start at the top with like the fire chief, the police chief, but also with members of the staff, with people in the planning department who you go to for permits. Really just humanizing those of us working in City Hall, because I think ultimately that's going to help in maintaining a really good image and community feel with the people in Brentwood. So like I said, that's going to take a while to kind of build upon. I would like to start and get one of these profile type things finished for the January newsletter, quarterly newsletter that will go out, and just kind of start from there. And then I'll sort of build up a routine and a schedule for how I would like those to go out. Like I said, it'll be a kind of a more long form article per se in the newsletter that can then be shortened and put on social media include some photos, maybe a couple video snippets of an interview or something like that. I'm still vetting kind of this whole idea, but that's kind of what I'm envisioning. So another thing that I feel really passionately about just in general is photos. I will never, almost never, post a social media post without a photo or graphic to accompany it. I do have a degree in graphic design, so like I said, I can kind of create graphics even if we don't have a photo per se. But that being said, I'm making it a point to get to as many city events as I can in order to gather photos and start building that photo database so that we have them to fall back on when we maybe don't have great photos to use. So I'm really, I'm passionate about that. And then eventually I'd like to start looking into video opportunities that may be available for us, because videos are always going to be more engaged with than static images, but static images are a really great place to start. And you have probably already seen, I post almost daily, at least once a day, sometimes more than one time a day. I always want us to be at the top of people's timelines when they're getting on their social media sites, because it
I have
keeps us
noticed that.
at the front of their brain. So, yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with the social media strategy just a few weeks in.
So, to build on that, I really like the idea of the profiles of the employees of the city. I mean, I know I talk to neighbors all the time who every once in a while will wonder about the name and identity or the story about the crew that picks up trash or the
Yes.
snowplow,
Mhm.
people, some of the people that work in the parks that they see at various things. And I think that's that's just a wonderful idea. The second thing I would suggest maybe is, what if you expanded eventually this process to some of the businesses in Brentwood?
Yes. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. I know I've mentioned this to Bola before. I would also like to start doing highlights of Brentwood businesses.
We have so many of
Yeah,
them,
exactly.
and so many of them are public facing that my kitchen conservatory comes to mind because they're brand new and they're coming in after a long anticipated time period. Um, and stuff like that. I think that would be
Absolutely.
a great way to promote the city and also kind of give people, oh, I didn't even know we had that here, that kind of thing. The last comment I would make, and it just went out of my head, we had a spokesperson for a very short period of time, a young lady who did some sort of on the scene kind of stuff. It was very high energy. It was really well done. It was well produced. She was a natural at it, and I wonder if there's any effort down the road maybe to getting back to something like that we would almost find ourselves having I don't want to call it a mascot, but somebody who would be like a cheerleader for the city, whether it's a young man, a young woman, maybe some combination, but somebody that eventually you sort of identify with, oh yeah, that's the guy who
The
tells
face
us
of
stories
Brentwood.
about Brentwood, or that's the girl that tells us about so-and-so.
Parks or something, yeah.
Yeah. Because as you say, and I think you're absolutely right about this, the moving pictures are so much more engaging than the static photos. I know the circumstance for her doing what she did for a short period of time was almost serendipitous how it kind of came about. But if something like that were to present itself again, I got to tell you, that was a popular thing, even though it was relatively short-lived.
One thing to consider for opportunities like that is looking at local colleges that have maybe like broadcast media
Great idea.
programs, because that is a really great internship possibility. So that may be something to look at, as we kind of
Got
move
Webster
forward.
so close by too.
Absolutely, Webster.
Right.
But then you also have Maryville, you have Lindenwood.
Yeah.
But Webster is really big into like the art, so they may definitely be something to kind of look at. But I think that either way, that's a really great idea, the face of Brentwood, if you will. And so yeah, I'm absolutely comfortable with like kind of looking into that, what that would look like, maybe developing, if we decide that using that as sort of a internship possibility for college credit. Because I know I was a print journalism student, but internships were difficult to come by in St. Louis in the journalism field. So, if it's something that it would set us apart to be able to offer something like that.
I think that'd be great. And I wouldn't overlook potential talent in staff. I think, you know, there may be somebody who, I work with a girl who, you know, also runs her own podcast on the side,
Yes.
and she's just an amazing, so now she's doing it for the company one of the companies that I'm working with. It's just, and she's an account manager, so you wouldn't think of her as sort of in front of the camera doing a podcast, but she's great at it. And I think a lot of the younger, you know, demographic are sort of more comfortable doing that, producing content. So I think, you know, first I want to acknowledge the contribution that Sean White has made, and I think that
He's been a lifeline for me, just
Yeah,
getting adapted to everything.
I think that as we continue to build this discipline for the city, making sure that we're crossing over and continue to work together with the Parks Department.
Have an opportunity, so unfortunately, he turned in his resignation.
No.
Yes.
So Eric, so that's the marketing position in Parks, and the person that you were talking about was the former marketing
in Parks,
person.
yeah.
So, and she happened to have been a on-air reporter, on-camera reporter, so it was just a great combination. So as Eric pursues filling that position, he will keep that in mind, and hopefully we'll be very lucky
I think
in
as
attracting.
it relates to parks programming,
Yes,
you know, having a high-energy person
Yes.
that can get out and kind of talk about the events coming up so that it's not
Right.
very passive.
right.
But I think that the frequency of posting and I'm seeing more colorful pictures and images for all of our posts, and so I think that does help. So you answered a lot of my questions that I had. I guess as far as the medium the content medium that you're going to focus on, I guess the only thing that I would wonder is, do you feel you have equipment that would be necessary to produce maybe higher quality images or anything like that? Is that something that we need to consider budgetary wise?
So I'm still trying to really get familiar with my budget. I've worked with Michelle in finance to kind of get the necessary documentation so that I can really look at where we're at with the communications budget. I know I've talked to Bola about potentially getting a camera. It is great to have, because cell phones can do so many great things now, but in terms of like higher quality photos,
Right.
those camera photos still are better.
Right.
So once I kind of get a better handle on the budget and where we're at, that is something that is one of the first like things I would like to look at, is getting a camera that can do both photo and video.
And maybe capture some good audio or something like that
Exactly.
with the microphone.
And to circle back to the, you know, spokesperson conversation, in the interim while we're figuring that out, I am comfortable with doing any on-camera, if that opportunity comes up. I don't want us to pass up because we don't have that one person in place.
That was part of the interview process.
Good, perfect.
So, and I've actually already gone in and revamped our entire media contact list, because the one that I found in Janet's files, I think, was probably a little bit old. And so I just went through and made sure it was completely up to date with all St. Louis media. So
Right.
we've got a pretty good contact list in there that press releases can go to, or any sort of announcements. And if need be, until we decide kind of the direction that we want to go with the program we were talking about, I'm happy to kind of fill that gap.
Right. And then as far as the strategy goes, when you push posts out, I know we've got, you know, I think each department, so the Parks Department has their own Facebook page, the city itself has the official Facebook page, and then there's a police Facebook page
Yes.
and fire
So
Facebook
fire-
page.
I actually just met, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bola. I just met with the fire department today. They have sort of an unofficial Facebook
That's
page
what I-
that
that's
is
what I was
run by the
wondering about.
firefighters, but we actually did discuss the potential of creating like the police department has, a fire department Facebook. So and that would be more of the official, that would be where the official fire department news goes out, like it does for the police department right now.
Okay.
So, and that's easy, but I want to discuss it with Bola before we do
Sure,
anything
sure.
with that.
But when you post, if it's If it's a post that's related to multiple departments, do you have the ability to post them at the same time, or are you
Yes.
posting it separate?
That's one of the great aspects of that Sprout Social that I was talking about is all of the accounts that I am an administrator for, which is all of the accounts. I am able to post to them all at one time,
Okay,
and it makes it really, really
so we're
easy.
not getting into sharing
No.
to different pages.
The
and
only
things like
difficult thing is when it's a longer post, you have to post to Twitter separately because it has to be
Right.
shorter. But other than that, it's a really seamless process.
that. Okay, great. Fantastic. Any other comments on social media strategy posts? It's awesome. I mean, it takes us into the next one, which is a presentation of the analytics. And as Alderman Plufka alluded to, the video does seem to have a lot more engagement.
Yes, yes. Overall, like I choose to look at things on like a month-to-month basis and then a year-long basis. And so overall, the last month was a little bit slower, and I think that was probably because Sean was filling that gap and doing a great job.
Yeah.
But he's also managing it for the Parks Department on top of his other work. But over the last year, you do see that there is some good growth there. And then I actually today ran some numbers just for the time period that I've been here, and we're seeing some good growth just in the last few weeks. So I think the frequency of posting is really making a difference. We're seeing a lot more engagement, a lot more reach on our posts. So I think just overall, there was a little bit of a lull there, but we're working towards improving upon that. And, you know, I keep a pretty constant eye on the analytics and how they're doing because that gives me it allows me to then really make changes in real time when they're necessary. So I'm not gonna just look at it once a year. I'll try to have updates for you every month when we meet, and if there are any changes that I notice that need to be made, I'll let you know that I'm planning to address those.
Yeah, and it looks like we've got a little bit of growth of our audience. And we're right around 7,500 total audience. What kind of strategies could you? I think the challenge we have as a community that I'm sure you're aware of is we have this unofficial
Yes.
community page that seems like has a lot of people that gravitate to it.
Yes.
And I think people don't always know that we've got the official page. I'd be interested in hearing some potential strategies other than just listing it in the newsletter that, hey, we have a Facebook page, right? But are there audience acquisition strategies that we could do for the community to try to get people to sign up to, or at least follow the official page?
So one thing that comes to mind that I would maybe be a good idea and could possibly be tested at the community Christmas party is almost like a photo booth. People, you can create a QR code, and that QR code people could scan it, and it would take them to our Facebook page, and like ask them to follow the page. So say I'm going around at the Christmas party taking photos, and I will tell people, this is going to be put on our Facebook page. Make sure you give us a follow.
Sure.
And we have placed sporadically these QR codes, and we encourage people to scan them. Makes following us really easy, like a one-step thing. Everyone's carrying their phone, and people love to see pictures of themselves on Facebook.
Yeah,
well,
that's great.
hopefully. And so that's one way to kind of jumpstart that. The other option is to, on each of our social sites and Nextdoor, I think, actually more like Nextdoor, I think is a really great place for us to drive that traffic. So posting on Nextdoor saying, are you following the city of Brentwood on social media? And giving them the direct links right there. So that, because I think Nextdoor is the equivalent off Facebook of the unofficial Facebook page, which I am following now, so I'm able to keep up with that. And hopefully as I build up a relationship with more of the people in the city of Brentwood, maybe I'll form a rapport with some of the administrators on that page and maybe we can work together a little bit.
Okay.
But I don't want to blow my cover on that page and
Yeah.
have them delete me.
Understood.
So
Understood.
that's something that I'm going to give some thought to and really develop a strategy on a audience growth kind of front. And so next month I can kind of present some ideas if that's okay
Great.
with you.
Yeah. Awesome.
But if it's okay with you, I may try that QR code at the community Christmas party.
I mean, do you need a direction or motion for?
I think she probably needs to talk to Eric about
Yeah,
most of this,
yeah.
because I'm hearing this for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, my ideas are coming to me.
Understood. That's fine. And I think those are whether they implement now or something as sort of planning for. I think those are the things that, as we talk about increasing analytics or looking at ways of growth, those are good ideas. Any other feedback on that? All right, so it takes us down to our next item, which is the citywide branding guidelines, which also now includes the Hanley Industrial Court Identity Plan. We have an update on that?
Why don't you take it?
Okay. So Bola and I have met. We met with Whitney as well to kind of start discussing where we're at with the RFP. I've reviewed the RFP that we have drafted at this point. You've made edits to it as well. And then I've reviewed kind of the document that we received from Arturis about the Hanley Industrial rebrand. I think that there's potential there, and it would be a good idea to kind of combine the two efforts. Because that just gives us the better chance to really standardize everything across the board. We're not operating two different, projects at one time, because we want them to go together. But so I think that the best way would be to include the Hanley Industrial in the current RFP that we're working for the city of Brentwood as a whole. That being said, the city rebrand is the priority. So we would want to include language in there that we can accept part of an RFP that comes in if we say we like the ideas that are being presented for the city rebrand, but we're not sold on the Hanley Industrial rebrand. We want to reserve the right to accept part of an RFP and not the whole thing. The important thing is getting the city rebrand off the ground. If we have to wait a little bit on the Hanley Industrial, so be it. Hopefully it'll all work and we'll like everything. I would suggest we wait until after the first of the year to push out the RFP.
Okay.
I just think because with the holidays coming up, it's likely that we won't get many responses and it'll get lost in the shuffle with everyone's hours being changed because of holidays. So and it also gives us a little more time to add the language about the Hanley Industrial rebrand into the current RFQ.
So with regard to the language in the RFP, does it complicate things, and does it something you have to mention within the RFP that our Parks Department has done some design work within Brentwood Park for sure, but also within the, in terms of colors, in terms of some style and fonts and things like that? Not that I'm being critical of any of what they've done, I'm not, but I'm just saying with regard to the RFP that goes out with rebranding of the city, certainly the Parks Department is part of the city. Is that something that are you gonna put it together such that there should be attention paid to complementing what's been done in the Parks Department and not, you know what I mean, so that it's not taking away from it, but is consistent with it, I guess. Okay.
For everything.
Even for the parks.
Even for the parks.
Okay.
I mean, it's gonna cost the city
Sure.
on what the consultant.
Right.
We could identify, okay,
To that end, would it be the same answer with regard to some of the streetscape iconography that we've got on Manchester Road right now that was part of the Arcturus? The flag bearing, and the circle design and the.
so that was,
Yeah.
at least
Well, I don't know that,
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about
like the B,
the circle and the B with the Brentwood through the middle of it.
um, or not.
Or complemented. I mean,
Yeah.
when we looked at, when you provided us collections of branding plans from like the city of Wichita, I want to say, and some other places that you showed us, there were collections of branding. It wasn't all exactly the same. They all complemented each other with the use of color and with logos and things like that. I'm just asking the question that in the RFP, are you asking whoever bids on this to take into account those designs or to literally start with a clean slate?
Yeah, yeah.
Whitney could too, but yeah,
Yeah, we really like those double names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, as we talked about it originally, and I think I'd love to have, I don't want to lock any potential consultant down and say, oh, here's your lane and that's it, right? But I do want to acknowledge that we do have some, like we've talked about, some potential legacy things that maybe aren't necessary to be changed, right? Or in some places, they're okay to remain, and then there's, as Alderman Plufka is saying, a new design aesthetic that there's maybe shares some complementary aspects of it, so that it's not a complete overhaul. But if a complete overhaul is what comes back as a recommendation and there's a good reason for it, then maybe that's why I don't necessarily think that we need to be in the RP, specific about saying, here's your lane, but potentially once we've identified the person, the company, agency that we would want to work with. Yeah. I mean, I think when we get the response back, we'll be able to identify whether or not, hey, this is exciting and we could probably, overhaul the whole thing, or this works really well in concert with some of the heritage of the city. I think it's just getting it started.
Right. I'm not advocating, going down to the underpass and chipping out the B, that looks like that B that's embedded in the concrete. I kind of like it. I mean, and I kind of like the color choices too. I was remarking to Alderman Gould when we were talking about this and when we took the tour of the playground. I'm astonished at the sheer volume of decisions that had to be made with regard to minute design implications, all throughout that entire 3 acres. And I'm telling you, I don't find very much fault with any of it. And I really think that, and I've told this to Eric a number of times, but I really think that their team and the consultants that we hired, SWT in particular, just were so thoughtful to the whole process. Whether that's, I was talking more in terms of the RFP, and would be more talking about just simply in the background part of the RFP to acknowledge the fact that we have this new playground that's coming online. We have this new park that is essentially around us, and there's going to be opportunity for, obviously, for signage, for trail signage, and for things like that. But and as a practical matter, we had to put things out there because you can't just leave it without any signage or labels. And so maybe it's enough to just say that it's there. And then whoever does do the bid, they have the option of saying, okay, well, let's take a look at that stuff, and let's, our bid is going to be to fashion something that's complementary, or maybe they're going to say, our position is that we really think we ought to come in with a blank slate and change it all.
Yeah, I mean, the unique thing about the new park is, a lot of the branding that you see and a lot of the color choices were driven by GRG, for a lot of that. And so what's great about the GRG is that they have great branding that actually stays consistent throughout their trails. So really, it's what do we do that surrounds that makes people know, oh, I'm in Brentwood now and no longer in Webster or whatever. So I think one of the things that we talked about that I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of is, in hearing your social media strategy, I think you're already kind of online, is just making sure there's some guidelines of how we are, if a communication goes out on a certain channel, what's the language, what's the tone, what's the, so I think that is something so that, if you're not doing everything, there's at least something for some departments to say, okay, some guidance on how we talk about
I
ourselves.
think that's a really good point.
There are documents that are called branding guides. And I think as we go through this rebranding process, something like that is a great idea. And a branding guide can really outline whatever you want it to outline. So it can include your color palette, it can include the fonts that you like to be used, but it can also include kind of information about the tone that you want set when it comes to public posts like that. So I think as we continue forward with this rebranding process, that's something that to consider, that once we kind of solidify that, we would definitely want to put out a branding guide for the city.
How long will the RFP goes out in that first month after the turn of the year? How long typically do you?
So the purchasing policy at the minimum is 10 days. So it could be greater than 10 days. And unless I'm hearing from you all that you want a response, and I think we'll hear back within the first quarter, and be able to bring something back. We want to make sure that they have time to submit something
right.
good.
Yeah.
So we would probably do at the minimum 3 weeks.
I would say, 3 to 4 weeks
Yeah.
is probably an appropriate.
That's what we do for major
initial
projects.
response, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about if we're gonna set a meeting, maybe 2 months from now.
So maybe March.
I was thinking more January or
January?
February, actually.
February,
I
mean, but it depends
I
on-
don't think we're going to have anything for you
Yeah.
that fast.
yeah, March probably.
Yeah.
Well, and the only other thing is, I think what's smart about including as almost the Hanley Industrial Court as a region within Brentwood in this initiative is that I think it creates a system for a sort of sub area. We have other sub areas, right? And so Manchester Road being one of them, we know that that's going to be kind of its own district, if you will. So, hopefully this can create at least some foundation or guidance to where, some of maybe naming conventions or how this all kind of flows, how some of our sub areas could kind of follow suit. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I definitely think it's a valuable thing. The last thing I would suggest is just make sure that it's in the RFQ, RFP, is things that we use for communicating regularly. A lot of departments use, right? I see a lot of PowerPoint presentations that are stock PowerPoint presentations from PowerPoint that are, every department has their own, but then none of them are Brentwood branded. And we have ward meetings, and that would be good to be, here's an officials template for people to use, so that there's at least some consistency with how Brentwood kind of presents itself. So those type of materials, digital materials, toolkit of those things would be good, and have each department have their own, like you said, colors and different aesthetic to it, but still seems like part of Brentwood. That would be important as we continue to evolve and progress into more digital realm. So, good stuff. Do you need any action on that, or, okay. So we're gonna just continue to refine, and then hopefully with first of the year,
If we have things sooner, we'll definitely be in touch and schedule a meeting.
okay, sounds good. All right. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Motion to approve.
I make that motion.
All right. Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. No old business, no new business, citizen comments. I don't know that anybody's online. Nobody's in the gallery for us. So no further business. This meeting is adjourned.